Greetings, massive. Hey. Wagwan, Jamaica. Can everybody please give Aubrey a big round of applause for the great introduction? I want to thank the University of the West Indies for hosting us. Big up, UE. Thank you. Yeah, I've been making myself at home here. It is great to be in beautiful Jamaica. Not only because I'm proud to be the first president of the United States to visit in more than 30 years, but because I just like the vibe here. I was born on an island, and it was warm, and so I feel right at home. And I'm grateful for the warm Jamaican hospitality that I received this morning, including from Prime Minister Simpson Miller. I also had the chance to meet with leaders from across the Caribbean, where we focused on issues of shared prosperity and shared security. And tomorrow I'll meet with leaders from across the hemisphere at the Summit of the Americas in Panama. But before my trip became all business, I wanted to come here and hear from young people like you, because it is your generation who will shape the future of our countries and our region and this planet that we share, long after those of us who are currently in public service are gone from the stage. So I'm going to only speak for a few minutes at the top, because I'd rather spend time taking questions from you, and also because after we have a chance for our town hall, I get a chance to say hi to Usain Bolt and Shelley Ann Fraser-Price. And when you have the fastest people on the planet, you got to say hi to them, right? Because that's fast. There are a lot of people out there, and they're the fastest. Now, we are not just nations, we're also neighbors. Tens of millions of Americans are bound to the Caribbean and the Americas through ties of commerce, but also ties of kin. More than 1 million Americans trace their ancestry to Jamaica. More than 1 million Americans visit Jamaica each year. So we're committed to you and this region. And as I've said before, in our foreign policy, there are no senior or junior partners in the Americas. They're just partners. And that's one reason why the United States has started a new chapter in our relations with the people of Cuba. We will continue to have differences with the Cuban government, but we don't want to be imprisoned by the past. When something doesn't work for 50 years, you don't just keep on doing it, you try something new. And we are as committed as ever to supporting human rights and political freedom in Cuba and around the world. But I believe that engagement is a more powerful force than isolation. And the changes we are making can help improve the lives of the Cuban people. And I also believe that this new beginning will be good for the United States and the entire hemisphere. My point is, I believe we can move past some of the old debates that so often define the region and move forward in a way that benefits your generation with new thinking. An energetic, impatient, dynamic, and diverse generation that you represent, both in the United States and across the hemisphere. More than 100 million people in Latin America and the Caribbean are between the ages of 15 and 24. Most of the region is under 35. And what gives me so much hope about your generation is that you're more interested in the hard work of waging peace than resorting to the quick impulse of conflict. You're more interested in the hard work of building prosperity through entrepreneurship, not cronyism or corruption. You're more eager for progress that comes not by holding down any segment of society, but by holding up the rights of every human being, regardless of what we look like or how we pray or who we love. You care less about the world as it has been and more about the world as it should be and can be. And unlike any other time in our history, the technology at your disposal means that you don't have to wait for the change that you're looking for. You have the freedom to create it in your own powerful and disruptive ways. Many of you already have, whether by starting your own enterprises or by helping others start theirs. And I'm going to just single out two remarkable young leaders who are here today because I think they're an example of what is possible, even in the most difficult of circumstances. So Angeline Jackson is here today. Is Angeline? Where is Angeline? There she is, right there. So several years ago, when Angeline was 19, she and a friend were kidnapped, held at gunpoint, sexually assaulted. And as a woman and as a lesbian, justice and society were not always on her side. But instead of remaining silent, she chose to speak out and started her own organization to advocate for women like her, get them treatment and get them justice and push back against stereotypes and give them some sense of their own power. And she became a global activist. But more than anything, she cares about her Jamaica and making it a place where everybody, no matter their color or their class or their sexual orientation, can live in equality and opportunity. That's the power of one person, what they can do. Jerome Cowens grew up in a tough part of Kingston. Where's Jerome? When Jerome was 12, he saw a friend gunned down. When he looked at the shooters, he said, I realized that wasn't a life I wanted to live. They had expensive machinery, but they had nothing else. So at the ripe old age of 13, he founded a youth group to help others like him stay on the right path. And he started small with only 6 people, but they had one big thing in common, and they believed that change was possible. And like Angeline, he was threatened for his work, but he kept at it. And he said, things won't get any better if no one does anything. And today, the Lead Youth Club he started has 6 chapters, including one in Colombia. His work has taken him to 5 continents. Last year, he became the first Jamaican to receive the Nelson Mandela Innovation Award. He's just 25 years old. So, individuals like those two the young people here today, you remind me of something that Bob Marley once said. You know, I went to his house yesterday. I thought, I'm only 5 minutes from his house. I got to go check it out. And one of the displays has to do when he was shot. Right before a concert he was supposed to give, trying to bring the political factions in Jamaica together. And he was treated for his wounds, and he went ahead with the program, went ahead with the show. And somebody asked, well, why would you do that? He said, the people who are trying to make this world worse are not taking the day off. Why should I? Why should I? So none of us can afford to take the day off. And I want you to have every chance, every tool you need to make this world better. So, today I'm announcing nearly $70 million in U.S. investments in education, training, and employment programs for our young people throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. And these investments will help young people in unemployed and impoverished and marginalized communities, give them a chance to gain the skills they need to compete and succeed in the 21st century economy. And that's not all. As president, some of the initiatives I'm most proud of are ones that increase my country's engagement with the next generation of leaders like Angeline and Jerome and all of you, leaders in government and civil society and entrepreneurship in the private sector. 4 years ago, I launched an initiative called 100 100,000 strong in the Americas, and the goal was to have 100,000 U.S. students studying in this region and 100,000 of this region's students studying in the United States by the end of this decade, and we are on track to meet that goal. So today, to build on that progress, I'm proud to launch the Young Leaders of the Americas Initiative right here in Kingston. And let me say this. This is not your traditional exchange. We're going to seek out the most innovative young entrepreneurs and civil society leaders in the Caribbean, Latin America, and we're going to give them a chance to earn a substantial continuum of the training and the resources and the connections, the networks, and the capital that you need to make a difference. So this year we'll bring 24 entrepreneurs and civil society leaders from Latin America and the Caribbean, including young Cuban leaders, to the United States. Then next year we'll increase this fellowship to 250 young leaders, and we'll help you to expand your commercial and social ventures. We'll embed you in an American business and incubators. We'll give U.S. participants the chance to continue their collaboration with you in your home countries. So the idea is that you'll get a chance to implement your ideas, but now have linkages that give you access to capital and research and all the things you need to mobilize and implement the kinds of things that you're doing. And this isn't charity for us. This is an investment in your future, because that means it's an investment in our future. A future where climate researchers in the Amazon can collaborate with scientists in Alaska. An idea in Barbados suddenly can be developed in an incubator in Boston. Anti-gang activities in Honduras can be connected to similar activities in Houston, Texas. It's a future where any kid from Kingston can choose a path that opens his or her horizons beyond their neighborhood to the wider world. And that impulse to make the world better, to push back on those who try to make it worse, that's something that your generation has to hold on to. And you have to remember, it's never easy. There are no days off. But if there's one thing that I know from my own life, it's that with hard work and hope, change is always within our reach. Yeah, the Jamaican-American poet Claude McKay, who was a central figure of the Harlem Renaissance, once wrote something along those lines. We must strive on to gain the height, although it may not be in sight. As long as we've got young strivers like you. And I hope to see you in Washington as part of this Young Leaders of the Americas initiative. I'm confident that brighter future will always be in sight. But thank you very much. With that, let's take some questions. All right? So, not yet. Testing. There we go. Testing. Everybody can hear me? All right. Since we're getting to work, I'm going to take my jacket off and get, comfortable. It's a nice university. All right. There are no rules to this except that there are people with microphones in the audience, so wait for them to come when I call on you. We're going to go boy, girl, so everybody gets a chance, so it's fair. And before your question, please introduce yourself and tell us where you are from. Okay? And try to keep your question or comment relatively short so we can get more questions or comments in. Okay? We will start with this young lady right here in the white blouse. It's a little tight here, so.
Thank you. Yoni Campbell, a lecturer at the University of the West Indies. Thank you so much for your talk. Very interesting. And I wondered as well on the Cuban issue, now that your policy has actually changed towards Cuba, I wondered about your views on how it is that we should approach, CARICOM should approach its relationship with Cuba in terms of deepening that relationship. Should they now perhaps move to join in CARICOM? Thank you.
Well, first of all, I think CARICOM can make its own decisions, and we'll respect it. Cuba will be participating in the Summit of the Americas, and I think it is my strong belief that if we engage, that offers the greatest prospect for escaping some of the constraints of the past. I think the Cuban people are extraordinary and have huge potential, and what's encouraging is that the overwhelming majority of Cubans are interested in ending the Cold War, the last vestige of the Cold War, and moving forward. It's going to take some time for the United States to fully implement some of the things that have already been agreed to, and it's going to take a little bit longer before you actually have implement some of the things that have already been agreed to, and it's going to take a little bit longer before you actually have complete normal relations between the United States and Cuba. What I would say to Caribbean countries is absolutely you should continue to engage in Cuba in the ways that you've already done in the past. I do think that it is important for all of us to be able to speak honestly where we see concerns about issues of human rights and political freedom. And I'm not saying anything publicly that I haven't said directly to Raul Castro. There are still constraints on the ability of the Cuban people to express themselves, or to organize political parties, or to start a business. And sometimes, the same things we expect for ourselves in our country, somehow we think other people don't want. But I believe that each country has its own unique cultures, its own unique traditions. I don't expect every country to pursue the same policies or have the same political practices as the United States. And I am certainly aware of the flaws that exist in our own country that we have to fix. But I do believe there are certain principles that are universal. I think that all people want basic dignity and want basic freedom and want to be able to worship as they please without being discriminated against, or they should be able to speak their mind about an important issue pertaining to their community without being arrested. And so wherever we see that, we try to speak out. But what we also try to do is engage and recognize that even with countries that we have differences, there's also going to be commonality and overlap. And the United States and Cuba should both have an interest in dealing with climate change, for example, because when the oceans start lapping up on Miami or on Havana, nobody's going to distinguish, well, where did they stand on this or that ideological issue? And so we have to find where there are areas of cooperation, but I will continue to try to be consistent in speaking out on behalf of the issues that are important to all people, not just some. Okay, good. All right, it's a gentleman's turn. This gentleman right here, he looks very serious. He's got glasses, and looking sharp. Plus, he's got a copy of my book, so.
Thank you very much, sir.
He's clearly a wise
Thank you very much. My name is Chef Brian Lumley. I'm a young Jamaican chef here, and I own a restaurant, 689 by Brian Lumley. Just saying. My question to you, I'm going to stay a little bit off the politics for a bit, and I've witnessed your journey a lot, and the question is kind of two-part. If you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice before the start of your 2008 term, what would it be? And the second part is, could you sign this book when you're finished? Thank you very much.
I'll sign the book. So the question was, for those who couldn't hear, if I were to go back and give myself advice before I started 2008, what would the advice be? I suppose I could have started dyeing my hair earlier. So then people wouldn't say, man, he's getting old. Probably, you're going like this. At least I got here, man. I'm teasing you. I'm messing with you. I think that, keep in mind that when I came into office, we were going through the worst global financial crisis since the 1930s. And so we had to make a series of decisions very quickly, many of which were unpopular. Overall, I think we got it right. I think we did the right thing. Because I think we took these steps, not only were we able to avoid the kind of Great Depression that we saw in the 1930s, not only was America able to bounce back and start growing more rapidly than most of our peers, drive down unemployment faster, create more jobs faster, but that also had an impact on the global economy, and it had an impact on the Caribbean economy, that we were able to bounce back quicker than we might have if we hadn't taken those steps. But it was, I think, costly politically, and what I would have probably advised was that I might have needed to warn the American people and paint a picture for them that was more accurate about the fact that it would take some time to dig ourselves out of a very big hole. Because FDR, when he came into office, the Great Depression had already been going on for 2-3 years. And so people understood how serious it was. With us, we came in just as people were really starting to feel the impacts, and trying to paint a picture that we'll make it, but it's going to take some time, and here are the steps that we need to take. I think I would have advised myself to do a better job spending more time not just getting the policy right, but also describing it in ways that people understood, that gave them confidence in their own future. I think that would probably be the most important advice that I would have given myself. So, good. All right, it's a young lady's turn. That young lady right there. Yeah, you. Yeah. You, yes. Oh. Well, I'll call on both of you. I'll call on you later. Go ahead.
Okay, so we're here and we're looking at you, and we're all very honored to be here and very taken aback by your leadership qualities, and seeing that you're the President of the United States of America and you're so influential. I want to know how you handle the mental strain that comes with being in charge of so much.
What's your name?
Kimberly McDermott from the University of the West Indies.
Fantastic. How do I handle stress? I'll be honest with you. One of the things that happens as you get older is you start appreciating both your strengths and your weaknesses. Hopefully, you gain a little wisdom about what you're good at and what you're not. And Michelle can give you a long list of things I'm not good at. But one thing that I've always had, which has served me well, is a pretty good temperament. And I attribute that partly from growing up on an island with trade winds and beaches, and it makes you calm. But I try not to get too high when things are going well, so that I don't get too low when things are going badly. And try to keep a long view of how the process of social change takes place, and how the trajectory of your own life is going to proceed. We get caught up in the day-to-day so much. And it's interesting now when I'm talking to my daughters, and if somebody said something at school, or there's, I didn't do quite as well on that test as I wanted. And you want them to take it seriously, but you also want to say to them, you know what, this too shall pass. I promise you, 3 months from now, much less 30 years from now, you will not remember. And so I think that trying to keep your eye on the prize of where it is, that you want to go, and not be discouraged or overly impressed with yourself on a day-to-day basis, I think is very important. And then you have to get some exercise in the morning to, so I don't run as fast as these folks, but I get a little exercise, which does help in terms of stress relief. All right, it's a gentleman's turn. Let's see. Somebody from this side. This young man right here in the sharp-looking checkered shirt.
Good afternoon again, Mr. President. Especially as it relates to human rights and social change, I'm Jermaine McKenzie, and I'm a focal point with the Global Fund Board. As it relates to human rights and social change, how do you make the decision to allow societies to go through the natural evolutionary process of having change occur on their own versus having governments exert policies to make these same political, social changes?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. It's an interesting question, and it's one that I have to struggle with all the time. Every society, as I said, is at a different phase in development, in their own history. They have different cultural traditions. And so the way I think about it is that the United States has certain core values and principles that we believe deeply in. And we don't necessarily expect that every country will formulate how to secure those ideals and those principles. We don't expect to be done exactly as we do, any more than we expect every... obviously, our democracy is not the same as a Jamaican democracy or a British democracy or Australian democracy, but we believe in democracy. We think that if people have the ability to speak out about their own lives, some sense of agency, then that society will be stronger. And that doesn't mean that we won't work with a country that doesn't precisely abide by those principles, but we will still speak out. There are times where a country is clearly engaging activities that are so egregious that it's not culturally specific. It typically has to do with the government wanting to exert control over people and oppress them. And in those instances, I think it is entirely appropriate for us to speak out forcefully, and in some cases to not do business with them. I mean, look at a country like North Korea. I mean, obviously Korean culture is different than American culture. On the other hand, you look at what's happening in South Korea and you look at what's happening in North Korea, and those are two entirely different societies. And I can tell you which one you'd rather live in. And if you have a situation in which people are being murdered simply because they didn't agree with the government on something or didn't want their economic fate to be entirely determined by the whims of some government bureaucrat, and suddenly they're sent to a labor camp, that's something where we as an international community have to speak out on. And then there's some issues that may be culturally specific, but you know what? I think they're wrong. I won't, we're not going to try to force that country to change, but I may try to shame that country. There are nations where slavery still exists. And that may be, part of the ancient culture in that society, but slavery is wrong. And I'm not going to give them the excuse that, this is who we are. In Africa, and I can speak, I think, fairly as somebody who's the son of an African father, there are practices like female genital mutilation. That may be part of the tradition there, but it's wrong. And I'm going to say so. And it'll be U.S. policy to say that it's wrong. So the tools we use to try to bring about change around the world may vary. And as I said earlier, we're not always perfectly consistent. There are times where we've got allies who are not observing all the human rights we would like. And there are times where there are countries that are adversaries of ours where they do some things quite well. You can't expect us or any country to be perfectly consistent in every circumstance. But what I've tried to do is be fairly consistent in terms of what we believe, what we stand for, and then we use different tools depending on what we think will bring about the most change. In some cases, it'll just be a diplomatic statement. In some cases, it may be serious enough that we will try to organize the United Nations or other multilateral forums to speak out against certain practices. In some cases, it may be so egregious that we need to sanction them, and we will try to organize the international community in that way. And then finally, in the ultimate circumstance, where the violations of our values are so severe that they start spilling over, and in the instance of, for example, genocide, we may say to ourselves, in concert with the international community, we need to intervene, because this government is so brutal and so unacceptable that we need to protect people. But we do that in the context of an international conversation, so that we're not simply making these decisions, or we're not so arrogant that we're not paying attention to what the rest of the world community is saying.